God, we love you. We thank you for all the things that are going on. Some are hard. Some are happy. Some are difficult. All the longings and the prayers and the requests. That's life. It's just joy and sorrow all the time. So we pray that you will continue to fill our hearts with joy in the midst of whatever circumstance we are in. We commit these next few moments to you and ask that you will be very present through the scriptures, and that when we leave, there will be this sense that, Holy Spirit, you have applied and spoken these words literally to our hearts. In your name we pray. Amen. So I have a picture for you. All right, so we have two oxen here, and these two oxen are connected by a yoke, okay? A yoke. Now, as a kid, I was a little disconnected from this word. I grew up in a farming environment, so I knew a lot about seeds and plants and crops and all that, but not this kind of farming and not this kind of work. So when I would hear the word yoke as a kid, my first thought was always like an egg yolk. Like I didn't really know what was being discussed until it was made clear to me. Jesus would be like, my burden is easy and my yoke is light. And I'm like, does that mean Jesus makes his eggs over easy, like over medium? Like, what does that mean, right? I think he liked omelets. But when you think about a yoke, you hear the scriptures refer to heavy yokes, okay? The scriptures refer to an easy yoke, which is the yoke of Jesus. I want to start in Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 through 14. Then a new king, a new Pharaoh, who did not know about Joseph, came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. It's like this despising of them, and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with hard labor and brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. In all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. Okay? Now we have framework, obviously, for slavery. We have the horrific history of slavery in our country. And then we're aware of modern day slavery through trafficking. Yeah, but this was a little different in nature in that you had almost like the government of the time, which wasn't a government like ours, but you had the government of the day recognizing a people that had been born into this nation and migrated into this nation. And as they became numerous, out of fear, they cracked down on them. So it would almost be like a military, oppressive structure to keep them in line and to keep them in check. And there was this disdain and this hatred for them, so they were brutal with them. It says they were ruthless. And there's even stories of, when Moses is trying to go before the Pharaoh and talk about deliverance, Pharaoh would respond in the opposite. Instead of lightening the load, he would say, now I want you to continue the same work, but I'm going to limit the supplies that I give you to do it. So it's just going to be even harder on you. It's going to be more oppressive. It's going to push you down even further and hopefully break your spirits. So Moses was born to deliver them, okay? They were delivered out of Egypt. So you know the story of the plagues and Moses, let my people go. And Moses just being this really shy and almost unwilling leader. But God calls him through the bush and he steps out and sees a miraculous deliverance of God's people. And then they're delivered, and now there are these nomadic people with a promise, but they're not there yet. So there's this nomadic people. God has called a people out of bondage. He's called a people out of this enslavement. And then he starts to give them these rules, right? Which we call the 10, okay? And you're like, oh, great, we're talking about 10 Commandments. No, but when you hear the 10 Commandments, we go, yeah. Don't do this, don't do this. And we go, man, that just seems so obvious. Imagine being a part of the world in a time, or imagine being a part of a place in the world in a time when it was kind of necessary to be like, hey, don't kill each other, right? Like, don't steal things that aren't yours, right? Like, don't do this, don't do that, like, don't lie. Well, here's an interesting one. It was I believe it was the fourth one. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or any servants, hired hands, or your female servant or your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates. So we go, yeah, like God told them, take a day off. We have the weekends and all that. But you have to go there. Like some of the last leadership they had been under said, now you're going to continue to build everything I want you to build. You're going to continue to make these bricks, and I'm not going to give you any straw, and we're going to beat you whether you're doing it good or whether you're not doing a good job. We're going to punish you either way. We're going to be ruthless with you. And then here you're given this commandment that to us sounds like, all right, I got to make sure I take a day off. They would have probably looked at each other and said, what? What do you mean? Like, there's a day we can rest, like my knees, like my shoulders, like my back. There's a day that I can relax and just be and celebrate. Like we get a day off, we work 6 days, and then we don't have to work it on the seventh. And then here's this little nomadic people on the move. I don't know how they move. There were so many of them, but I'm assuming they would move for a while, set up camp, move for a while. They had animals and all that. It's hard for us to even fathom. But then they would be next to other people groups, and you can imagine these other people groups being like, so there's thousands of people that have sort of moved in across the street, honey. Yeah. Like they don't work on Saturdays. And it's like this day that's set apart to their God, and they acknowledge that he's holy and righteous and good, and they can rest because he's enough. They can rest because no matter how hard they till this soil, he makes it rain, right? That's different. They're different. Okay? So there was this unique witness attached to the Sabbath. Now let's go back to Pharaoh. Well, let me say this first. We're talking about patterns. Sabbath is a kingdom pattern that goes against the patterns of the world. When it was originated, and it still goes against the patterns of the world now. Okay? It's a kingdom pattern that goes against the patterns of the world when it originated, and it still goes against the patterns of the world now. So let me read this to you. Pharaoh was real, but he was also the clearest biblical archetype for Satan himself. Okay? Like, he wasn't Satan. When you think about who was very close in the way that he dealt with God's people, who was like an archetype in the Old Testament that helps us see the way Satan's heart is toward us. Okay? He set himself in opposition to God and resisted the salvation of God's people whom he had enslaved. Okay? That was Pharaoh. Like that was his thing. That was how he operated. Okay? So Satan is the one, we know that we live in a fallen world. I said this during communion. Satan is the one who, when Paul says in Romans, which is kind of our guiding verse in this booklet, do not be conformed to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The patterns of the world are the patterns of the fallen world. Okay? And the one who orchestrates and the one who originates and the one who works through the patterns of the world is Satan. Those are his patterns. That's his thing. Rich Villodas, a pastor in New York City, wrote this. Here's the truth. If you cannot stop your work, no matter how much you love it, for a 24-hour period, it's an indication of your slavery. It's an indication of your slavery. Now, some of you hear that and go, oh man, that makes me feel like, Jared, what are you talking about? Well, why can't you stop? Well, I just don't think I can stop. I just don't think I can stop. Is that your lie? Did you make that up? Who told you that? Did you read that somewhere? Where'd that lie come from? How has that lie been ingrained in you? Well, culturally and everybody, okay, where'd all that originate? Well, the shows that I watch and the books, if you don't outwork everybody and work 48 hours a day, you can't. Where'd that come from? Okay, where did all that come from? Not God. So that's a deceitful lie that's been spun into this culture that enslaves us. It enslaves our minds, enslaves our emotions, it enslaves our bodies. Jesus said, Matthew 11, 28 through 30, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. I will give you rest. That's how I find out who's paying attention. I will give you rest. Okay. Great, you're all with me. Okay. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. That's deep rest. Sometimes I need to sit down, but more often than not, I need rest for my soul, right? For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. John Mark Comer wrote this, an easy life isn't an option. An easy yoke is. Jesus didn't say, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy, and man, everything will just be like a 1970s sitcom moving forward. Just it'll all work out in 30 minutes. No. He said, I'll give you peace. David wrote, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He restores my soul, right? Restores my soul. I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That sounds horrible. Okay, I don't want to go through there, but we do. But I fear no evil because you're with me. Okay? Easy life's not an option, but an easy yoke is. Okay? An easy yoke is. So we can operate under the tyrannical, oppressive yoke of the culture enforced by Satan, or we can yoke ourselves to Jesus. Jesus is gentle and humble. Okay? We claim allegiance to a resurrected God-man who describes himself as humble. Okay? Humble. So Satan never stops. Here's what's interesting. Depending on which gospel you're in, there's a lot of the same info, especially in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But depending on which gospel you're in, right when Jesus says, I think it's in Matthew's, he mentions, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, come to me, all of you who are weary. The next interaction that he has are the Pharisees pushing down on him for not keeping the Sabbath perfectly. Okay? Now, when you really dig into it, much of the religion that Jesus was born under was not what God was birthing and not what God was hoping for in its origins in the Old Testament. Okay, Jesus was born under a bit of a cult masquerading as Judaism. Okay? And you go, really a cult? Yeah, the way you identify a cult, there's a lot of religions that even use the same Bible as we do, but the way you identify a cult is through control and oppression. Okay? So Jesus was born under a group led by these Pharisees that had taken good things, gifts like Sabbath, and had turned them into oppressive structures for control. So one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. Then the Pharisees said to him, I just like, where were these guys? Did they pop up out of nowhere? Like, ha! Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? I mean, just shut up, right? But this was how they were. He answered, have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need in the days of Abiathar, the high priest? He entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat. He also gave some to his companions. So Jesus just dips back with his vast knowledge of the Old Testament and blows these guys up as he always did. But then he makes a more important point and says, then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. I can say I give you rest because I'm Lord of the Sabbath. That rest that you're eternally longing for, that's being with me. That's my rest. I am rest. There is no rest outside of me. There is no peace outside of me. If it's real rest, it involves me. So the Sabbath, being created as a gift to not work, is a foreshadowing of rest in me forever. When all the striving and toiling stops because the serpent's on the ground. Okay? It's when it's all done. And he's defeated, it just hasn't fully happened yet. We can rest in that. What is the worldly satanic pattern against true rest in our day? Okay. John Ortberg, who's written quite a few books, had a conversation years ago with a guy who's passed on now named Dallas Willard. So Dallas Willard wrote books that you may have heard of, like Spirit of the Disciplines, and this whole patterns idea. He's really just helped the church not lose that. He and Richard Foster and a few others. But John Ortberg sits down with Dallas Willard, and he's like, okay, I've got a moment with this guy. And he asks him a question. He goes, what do I need to do to stay spiritually healthy? What do I need to do to stay spiritually healthy? And and you're just getting ready, right? And Dallas says, ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. And John's like, oh, word, writes it down. Okay, all right, what else? And Willard looks at him and says, there is nothing else in our time and in our day. The number one enemy of the souls of people in the West is hurry. It's hurry. Corrie ten Boom said, if the devil cannot make us bad, he will make us busy. I don't know how that's hitting you, but I've struggled to believe like that. Even that phrase about hurry and all that, like I just want to acknowledge that you may be rejecting that. And I can enter into that with you because so did I for a while. But when I'm talking about Sabbath, I'm preaching to the choir, and the choir is me. Okay? I'm talking to me when I'm talking about Sabbath. Because no matter how much I don't want to accept that simple truth about hurry, and you understand what I mean, hurry. I don't mean like, so if I'm running to catch my flight, it's the number one enemy of my soul. I mean a hurried, like, yeah, you should have got out, you should have got there on time. No. I'm worried about TSA pre-check. No, I'm talking about like inner, okay, when these can't stop and this can't stop because this is disordered. And if I run long enough like that, I'm not centered anymore and I become fragmented. Okay, my soul, it just feels fragmented and I'm striving. And my interactions are different, and the way I process information is different, and the way Jocelyn and I engage is different, and the way my disposition and even my time and energy and bandwidth for my children is different. And I just want to recluse or hide or let everybody know how much I'm doing, or wherever you go. I go to all of them, all those different places, some way, shape, or form. Why? It's because I'm hurried inwardly. My inner life is hurried. So John Mark, who's been a student of John Ortberg, wrote this book, and he titled it The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. The entire book, I highly recommend it to you. It's really good on Audible, actually. He reads it himself. But he took that phrase and wrote an entire book about it. But he says in the book, to restate, love, joy, and peace are at the heart of all Jesus is trying to grow. I think I have this quote for you. Of all Jesus is trying to grow in the soil of our life, all three are incompatible with hurry. Okay, let me read it again. To restate, love, joy, and peace are at the heart of all Jesus is trying to grow in the soil of your life, and all three are incompatible with hurry. You cannot hurry your way into love. I mean, even Paul's big litany on love, the first phrase, love is, does that sound like hurry? Patience is the opposite of hurry. It's kind. You can't blow through your life and be kind, right? Peace can't be in a hurry. Peace takes time. Making peace takes time. Having peace takes time. Peace in and of itself, just the concept of peace, can't sustain long in an environment of hurry. Okay? And then joy, man, I don't know anybody strung out, burned out, not sleeping, not resting, over-caffeinated. You know, one thing to wake you up, one thing to put you to sleep, right? One thing to help you get going, one thing to help you turn off. I don't know anybody in that state that joy is just, why? Because there's no room, there's no margin for it. It's a grind, literally. And it's evil, not your evil. That atmosphere is evil. That belief system is evil. Satan, I want everybody to hear this. I wrote this down somewhere in my notes, I don't remember where. Satan hates you. You bear the image of God. And now the image of the Son who defeated him is being formed in you. That amped up his hate. He doesn't want you to rest and be restored. He doesn't want you to rest and experience restoration. He doesn't want you to lie down in green pastures so that the Lord can restore your soul. He doesn't want you to drink from springs of living water. He does not want that for you because that's so good for you. He will do everything that he can to keep that from happening, and he has. Okay? We are in a culture that you talk about going against the patterns of the world. Go take a walk through your neighborhood. Don't be running. Don't be power walking, listening to your book. Just mosey. Just mosey. People will offer to help you. People will stop and give you directions. They'll hand you a bottle of water. They'll ask you what you see up there. Is something going to harm us? Like, it's countercultural. That's not the pace of society that the enemy has forged here. And we have to reject it. We have to reject it. We have to go against it. Now, I want you guys to put your hand to things and be fruitful and be creative. I want you to work hard when you're working. I do. That's great. I think that's beautiful. Okay? Laziness is no good either. There's no joy and peace in that. But I want you to also be able to say, because inwardly, my life is ordered, I can turn it off, okay? So John Mark goes on to write this. The Hebrew word Shabbat means to stop. Sabbath means to stop. But it can also be translated to delight. It has this dual idea of stopping and also of joying, I like that word, joying in God and our lives in this world. How about that? When's the last time we did that? I'm just joying in God and my life in this world. What's wrong with you? Get back to work, right? The Sabbath is an entire day set aside to follow God's example, to stop and delight. Remember when he did that? I think that was on purpose, the way he rolled out creation for us. Stopped. This is good. Remember that? He created, stopped. This is good. Delight. I like this work that I've done. Okay? So why can't we stop? You can make note of these. I don't have these in your booklet, these questions, but they came to me this week, and I think they're helpful. I think they're all on the same slide patch. If they are, we can just throw them all up at the same time. We hurry to avoid our inner life, okay? And that would be work is a drug, okay? Okay, that's fine. We can do them like that. We hurry to avoid our inner life. Work is a drug. I've got some pain in here. There's some things going on in here. There's some hurt. But I can go accomplish something, put my hand to something, put my head down, get something done, and not face and deal with this. Okay? So I think that for some of us, that might hit home. We work to justify our existence. I am what I do. I can't stop because this is more about your identity. Like, I don't know who I am when I'm sitting. I don't know who I am when I'm resting. I don't know what to do if I'm not doing something. So it's hard for me to stop doing the thing that I'm doing because it feels like there's a justification in it. It's okay if all of these are hitting you, okay? The reason I came up with these is because I can resonate with them, okay? Some of you are like, man, I thought it was the first one. Now I'm 2 out of 3. I hope I'm not the third one. All right. And the third one, we strive to meet everyone's expectations. Fear of man. Okay? I don't know your boss. I don't know your coworkers. I don't know all that. Okay? You do. Right? And I don't know the environment that you go to work in. And I know that sometimes these things are not as linear as 3 points. Life is different shades and colors and circles, and right? But I do know that if you live your life enslaved to either one of those lies, if you live your life under the lie that you cannot avoid what's going on inside of you, you must numb it out with work. If you live your life using work to justify your existence, your identity, or if you strive all of the time to meet other people's expectations, that's enslavement. I do know that. Okay? And that will not refresh your soul. That will burn you out. That will burn you to a crisp. How can you be so sure? Exhibit A. Okay? Culture tells us, next slide, culture tells us we must overproduce to justify our meaning, value, and worth. Slavery. That's Pharaoh. Sabbath is a weekly reminder that we are God's image bearers, given the dignified honor to steward, create, and produce. Lions don't get up in the morning and grab their briefcase and go to the office. Okay? Right? Like you've never interviewed a giraffe for the position at your company. We're different. We bear his image. We've been given the honor and the dignity. The honor and the dignity. Work. We get to work. We get to create. We get to produce. We get to steward. We're mankind. Jesus became one of us. We're human beings created in the image of God, so we've been given the dignity and honor to work and produce and steward. It's a gift, just like rest, to join God in that, to be creative and to join him in his work. Okay? So we'll end with this. What are some helpful ways to ensure we Sabbath well? What are some helpful ways to ensure we Sabbath well? The first is this, and it might sound like work. Prepare. Okay? Prepare. So that means if you're going to take a day, I think that there's some freedom. For many of you, it's going to make sense for it to be Sunday. It doesn't make sense for me to be Sunday, so I have a different day that I take. But if it makes sense for Sunday, I think that's a good thing, okay? But prepare, which means at the end of the day before, if there's any loops that you need to close, if there's anything that you need to fire off, if there's anything that you need to actively set down, take it off your desk, get it out of the way, move it, take it out of your line of sight, whatever that might be for you to disconnect. Prepare the night before to not work. So when you're shutting down, whatever time that is the night before, prepare that night to not work the next day. Actually, prepare not to work. Okay? Get yourself ready. So, because if you don't, you'll wake up and it'll just happen to you. You'll check the thing and the other thing will ring and the other thing will buzz and all the noises, right? So you just prepare not to work, okay? The second is plan. And what does that mean, Jared? Sounds like a really harsh job description so far, all right? What I mean is, what are you going to do that day? So I found that no matter how much I want it sometimes, 23 hours of television in a 24-hour day isn't really a Sabbath. Okay, you watch that first episode and you go, ooh, I'm really disconnecting from everything. You watch the 12th episode and you go, man, I kind of hate who I am inside. You know? I don't like myself at all. So look what I've eaten, look what I've done. There's just a mess. Napkins. That one has chocolate on it. I don't even remember that, right? Like what's happened to me, right? Told my kids to leave the room 48 times. Like, what is this? So maybe have a plan. We're going to do something. You say, look, you know what? I'm going to reach out to my friend and I'm going to ask them if they would like to go meet me for coffee. And I'm going to say, here's the rules. Please don't ask me about work. Let's talk about anything else. All right? I'm going to go to the river. I'm going to go to the river walk, especially now that it's cooling off, and I'm just going to go for a walk. Okay? If you read for a living, don't plan to read on that day. Plan to use your brain in a different way. But if you work primarily with your hands, a book might be really refreshing for you. That might be a different way to use your brain. So maybe you want to read a novel, or maybe you want to not do that at all, okay? So here's the next one. Play. We've lost that. Okay? We get so busy. So play. Some of you golf, but just play a game. Play Uno. Play Monopoly. Play, shoot hoops. Do something fun. Go to a game. Play. Ask your friend, hey, would you like to meet me at the coffee shop? We're going to have coffee, and I'm also bringing a game. You want to play a game? Like, let's just laugh. Let's accuse each other of cheating and breaking the rules. Like, let's just, you never know somebody till you play a game with them. You ever notice that? You're like, oh, I thought I knew you. You're a game tyrant. I didn't know that about you, okay? And then the last P is party. Stop and delight, okay? Sunday should be a part of this in some way, shape, or form. Being here, you go, I was told my whole life, you got to go to church, or you're not this, you're not that. This is a pattern. You come in and you celebrate, and you look, you make eye contact with people across the room, and they're holding the bread and the cup, and you see them going, God, like, oh, who do I need to forgive this week? And you go, yes, what's happening right now? This is a pattern. This is a rhythm of my life. The culture doesn't do this weekly. The culture doesn't sit under 2,000-year-old scriptures weekly. We're doing it. We're renewing. We're worshiping. We're thanking God. I don't feel like worshiping. Have you ever noticed that when you go out first, sometimes it changes on the inside? You don't have to feel like it. I'm choosing because he's worthy. But you can also, have people over, feast, do city group, but just say this city group's just a meal. Like we're all going to get in the kitchen and cook. And we're going to, you're going to make your dip and you're going to make your thing. And we're just going to party. We're going to have a good time. We're going to enjoy each other. That's a gift. I feel bad. I have things that I need to be doing. God doesn't want that for you. God didn't say on the seventh day, feel bad about the things that I told you not to keep doing on the seventh day. Okay? So just delight. The discipline of choosing to delight. Like smell your food before you eat it. This is about to taste good. Announce that. This is about to taste good. And then smell it. And then eat it. And be like, yeah, food. God didn't have to make it so that we lived on food. He could have made it that we lived on gasoline. But he made it that we live on food. I'm so thankful because food's delicious. So just, this is silly, but it's not. Just stop and delight. For goodness sake, guys, this life's hard. Take that yoke off. Take it off. Take it off. Put it down. Take it off once a week. It tries to get back up there. Take it off again. Yoke yourself to Jesus again. He's humble and gentle. He's not a Pharaoh. He doesn't want to control you. The beautiful thing about Jesus' yoke is he goes, take it. He doesn't say, come here. He says, take it. So what? We go like this. We put it on. We receive it. But we submit to his yoke. It's not control and punishment. We submit to his yoke. And we walk with him at his pace. And the soil of our hearts begin to grow love and peace and joy. And the love and the peace and the joy spills out all over us. And it spills out all over our city. And it spills out all over this world. And it's a completely different substance than what's spilling out of the culture. It's a counter pattern. It's a choice to move with him, to walk with him, and to be with him. Would you stand? So Shannon's going to come back up in just a moment and lead us into prayer. I want everybody on three, we're going to take a deep breath. 1, 2, 3. It's cooling off outside, okay? Next Sabbath for you, whenever that is, go out in the morning or go out in the evening, sit down in a chair. Don't put anything in here, any little white things in your ears. Just take those out, put them on the table, and just breathe. Okay? You'll get a nice little mixture of pollen in that breath, but just, so it's worth it. Just let the oxygen go in and let it go out. And say, Lord, I'm not wearing the world's yoke today. I'm wearing yours. So, if you are in this room and you want prayer for anything, but if you also say, I want to be prayed over, I want someone to pray peace over me, I want someone to pray rest over me, I want someone to pray joy over me, then you can come down. And our prayer ministers that are here, you guys can already come forward. And they'll specifically pray that way, and then they'll pray anything else that the Lord is leading them to pray. And then if you're here and you need prayer just for any other reason, whatever you walked in with or whatever you limped in with, we'll pray for you as well. So I'll lead us just in a time of prayer, and then I want you to come forward. Shanna's going to come up. God, thank you for this church. Jesus, thank you for your yoke. We release our burdens. In your name we pray. Amen.